In the previous video, we briefly discussed the role of the state in China's history, okay, or to help us understand the difference between China and the United States, or probably many other Western economies. We are going to look at more specific cases or influences of the Chinese government in its economic development later, okay, when we talk about China's economic reform and opening up. All right. And here in this video, we're going to look at the second important thing, which is the role of education. Now here we said the revisited because back in chapter 1, when we talk about Thomas Malthus, you probably still remember we already talked about the role of education in economic development. Okay? We said it's a very important and persistent driving force of economic prosperity. Okay? And according to Malthus' theory on population, he back then, before Industrial Revolution, he worried about the crash of the apprenticeship system, which would lead to less educated labor force, okay? And in the long run, it could lead to a lower income per person because of the lower productivity. Okay. Now, in chapter 1, we also briefly discussed this piece of empirical evidence, which is a cross-region comparison, okay, about the primary school lead enrollment rate. Again, primary school just means the elementary school, and lead means the enrollment rate at the beginning of the semester minus the dropout rate. Okay, because in the developing countries, we usually see a high dropout rate. Okay. The conclusion we drew in chapter 1 is, when you look at the Eastern Asia and Southeastern Asia, Oceania, these two areas after 1980s, you would find that their primary school net enrollment rate was very close or even equal to the developed countries. Okay? In other words, they value the education a lot. Because remember, in these two regions, they still have a large population living in a relatively poor or lower income level, right? So at their income level, they can achieve nearly 100% primary school net enrollment rate, which is very impressive. Okay. However, now, back in chapter 1, we did not really answer the question why people in these areas value education that much. Okay, we see, the positive influence of education upon economic prosperity, but we did not really find why, okay, or how they achieved such a high level of education. Now, here we would like to discuss several more pieces of empirical evidence. Okay, this is what I put out from Gapminder. Okay, the country level comparison, so you would be able to see more details. Again, on the vertical axis, I put the primary school completion. Okay, so it's still it's not the enrollment rate or net enrollment rate. It's how what percentage of the kids at the schooling age actually finish the primary education. Okay, the horizontal axis is the income. So we're still looking at that relationship between these two variables, and we still find that a positive relationship, and you could argue it's probably non-linear. In other words, when we look at the lower and the middle income countries, we find a strong positive relationship. And among the middle income and high income country groups, that relationship is not that strong because, for these middle income countries, they already reached nearly 100% primary school completion. Okay, so it makes sense that because 100% is almost the ceiling, okay, the highest possible one they can achieve. So that's why among these high income countries we won't be able to see that positive relationship. Okay, it doesn't mean education doesn't matter. It actually means the countries already achieved them at a relatively lower income level. By the way, you see some countries, they have the dots or numbers above 100%. That's because they have the kids, even beyond their school age, but they, still go back to school and finish their primary education, which is pretty common, again, in developing countries. Okay, so when they were young, when they were supposed to go to the primary schools for many reasons, they didn't do that. Okay, probably they worked in the field, helping their families, or they go out and in the urban area find a job to work, or for whatever reason they did not really finish their primary school education, and then later in their life, probably when they are even 20s, okay, and they went back to school and finished that. So that's why the completion, the kids who completed the primary school education could be even more than the kids within that school age. Okay, like between 5 and 12. Okay. All right. So here we still see the positive influence of education. All right. Let's check out the other one. This is a mean years. That means the average years in school, okay, across countries for men 25 years and older. Okay, that's in the vertical axis, and in the horizontal axis, that's income per person. Okay, now here again you see a very strong, I would say, linear correlation between these two. So it reinforced our understanding of the positive role of education, okay, in the economic development. What's interesting is I would like to drive your attention to these red bubbles or circles, because these stand for the Asian economies. Okay, you would find that most of them are kind of line up along this trend line, the linear trend line. Okay, what does that mean? I want to ask you guys. Okay, if you want to know more details about what these countries are, you probably need to go to the Gapminder and pull out your own chart. So when you move your mouth on the top of that circle, it will show you which country that represents. Okay, I believe this one, on the far like upper right corner, this is Japan. This is probably South Korea. And here is the biggest one is China. Here is India. Okay, and these ones, the bottom left corner, these are I believe the either the Central Asia or Middle East economies, I believe. Okay. All right. The next one we showed you is for females. Okay, women 25 years old and older. Again, for the same pair of variables. Okay, we see the same positive correlation. Okay, pretty much consistent with the previous Gapminder figure. Okay. However, here I would like to raise two things for you guys to think about. Okay. The first one is the relative position of Asian economies, as I mentioned a minute ago. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, and where they stay on this figure, and what does that mean? What's an economic interpretation of that? Okay, does that reinforce our understanding of the positive influence of education upon development, or does it actually raise a possibility of the reverse causation? Okay, so think about this and bring your thoughts to our class discussion. Okay. And now let's again dig deeper in trying to figure out why Chinese value education so much. Okay, now this chapter will talk about China, but you may find that when we talk about the role of education, what I'm discussing is actually beyond China. We talk about Asia in general. Okay, I think here what we're going to do is we're going to take a historical perspective to understand why Chinese people value education so much. And because it's a historical perspective, you would find that because of the Chinese immigrants, okay, they left China in history and went to different parts of Asia, okay, including Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. So the whole East and Southeast Asian economies or the regions, to some extent was actually influenced by the Chinese, their beliefs in education. Okay, and so the first thing is we look at the history and trying to figure this out, and then the second thing is we're going to talk about if that influence is still existing today. Okay, and one thing I posted on our Moodle page is an article published on the magazine Time about Amy Chua in her book on tiger parenting. All right, I think the title of the book is the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom. It's a memoir of her own parenting experience. Okay? And if you haven't get a chance to check out that article and also a short TV interview, okay, Amy Chua did, please pause this video and go check out those ones first, okay? Because what we're going to talk about here is built upon that article in the interview. Okay, you got to understand, the way Amy Chua chose to parent her two daughters, I believe, and so that you would understand what we're going to discuss here. Okay, but again, the key is why tiger parenting. Okay, is that just a tradition or a culture, or is there any specific reasoning behind these tiger parenting methods? Okay, again, keep that in your mind when you check out the article and the TV interviews. Okay, so this is what we're talking about on this video, okay, the QRL video. On the next one, we're gonna start exploring the answer to this tiger parenting thing by looking at the Chinese history, especially the structure of the ancient Chinese society.